create frame animations. Create frame animations. So note here please now, for Photoshop versions earlier than Photoshop CC, some functionality discussed in this article may be available by the way only if you have Photoshop Extended, and Photoshop doesn't have a separate Extended offering, and all features in Photoshop Extended are part of Photoshop. So what about frame animation workflow? What about frame animation workflow? By the way, in Photoshop, you can use the timeline panel to create animation frames. Each frame, by the way, represents a configuring of layers. And do not be careful here, please now. You can also create animations using a timeline and keyframes. And you have to see create timeline animations, by the way. Like the next image and next screenshot explain for you now. Illustration of an animation, and thus the uncycle image is on its own layer, by the way, and the position of the layers it changes in each frame of the animation. And to create frame-based animations in Photoshop, you can use the following general workflow. You have to open a new document. Open new document, by the way, if they are not already visible. Open the timeline and layers panel and make sure that the timeline panel is in a frame animation mode, by the way. And in the middle of the timeline panel, you should click the downpointing arrow to choose create frame animation, and then click the button next to the arrow. And how to add a layer or convert the background layer. How to add a layer or convert the background layer. Because a background layer can't be animated. Add a new layer or convert the background layer to a regular layer, by the way. And you have to see convert background and Photoshop layers. And how to add content to your animation. How to add content to your animation. By the way, if your animation includes several objects that are animated independently, or if you want to change the color of an object or completely change the content in a frame, create the objects on separate layers. And how to add a frame to the timeline panel. Should to see add frames to an animation, and select a frame. See select animation frames. And how to edit the layers for the selected frame. You should do any of the following. You should turn visibility on and off for different layers, and also should change the position of objects or layers to make layers content move, and also should change layer opacity to make content fade in or out, and also should change the blending route of layers, and also should add a style to layers. And Photoshop provides you, by the way, Photoshop provides tools for keeping characteristics of a layer the same across frames, and you should see unify layer properties in animation frames. How to add more frames and edit layers as needed. By the way, the number of frames you can create is limited only by the amount of system memory available to Photoshop, and you can generate new frames with intermediate changes between two existing frames in the panel using the twin command. This is a quick way, by the way, to make an object move across the screen or to fade in or out. And you should to see create frames using twinning. And what about set frame, delay, and looping options? Set frame delay and looping options. By the way, you can assign a delay time to each frame and specify looping so that the animation runs once a certain number of times and or continuously. See, specify a delay time in frame animations and specify looping in frame animations. And how to preview the animation. By the way, you can use the controls in the timeline panel to play the animation as you create it. And then you can use the save for web command to preview the animation in your web browser. And you can see preview optimized images in a web browser. And how to optimize the animation for efficient download. You have to see optimize animation frames. And how to save the animation. If you would like to save the animation, there are different options for saving your frame animation, by the way. You have to save as an animated GIF using the save for web command. And after that, you have to save in Photoshop PSD format so you can do more work on the animation later. And after that, you have to save an image sequence and then QuickTime Move or as separate files. See also export video files or image sequences. How to add frames to an animation. By the way, adding frames is the first step in creating an animation, by the way. And if you have an image open, The timeline, by the way, panel displays the image as the first frame in a new animation, and each frame you add starts as a duplicate of the preceding frame, and you then make changes to the frame using the layers panel. We have two steps. Step number 1, you should make sure the timeline panel is in frame animation mode. Step number 2, click the duplicate selected frames button. And how to select animation frames. Before you can work with a frame, by the way, you must select it as the current frame, and the contents of the current frame appears in the document window. In the timeline panel, by the way, the current frame is indicated by a narrow border, and inside the shaded selection highlight around the frame thumbnail. Selected frames are indicated by a shaded highlight around the frame thumbnails. How to select one animation frame? Select one animation frame. You should do one of the following. To select one animation frame, click a frame firstly. After that, click the select next frame button to select the next frame in the series as the current frame. After that, click the select previous frame button to select the previous frame in the series as the current frame. After that, select the select first frame button to select the first frame in the series as the current frame. And how to select multiple animation frames. By the way, in the timeline panel, do one of the following. You should to select continuous multiple frames, and then shift click a second frame, and the second frame and all frames between the first and the second are added, by the way, to the selection. And to select this continuous multiple frames, control click if you use Windows, or command click if you use macOS, and additional frames to add those frames to the selection. And to select all frames, you should choose select all frames from the panel menu. And after that, to deselect a frame in a multi-frame selection, you should click control. If you use Windows, or command click if you use macOS. That frames. How to edit animation frames? If you would like to edit animation frames, what should you do? We have two steps. Step number 1, in the timeline panel, you should select one or more frames, by the way. And number 2, to edit the content of objects in animation frames, you should use the layers panel to modify the layers in the image that affect that frames. And after that, to change the position of an object in animation frame, you should select the layer containing the object in the layers panel and drag it to a new position, by the way. And note and be careful here, please. Now you can select and change the position of multiple frames. However, if you drag multiple discontinuous frames, the frames are placed, by the way, continuously in the new position. And to reverse the order of animation frames, choose reverse frames from the panel menu. And note and be careful, please, here now. The frames you want to reverse don't have to be continuous, and you can reverse any selected frames, by the way. And to delete selected frames, you should choose delete frame from the timeline panel menu, or click the delete icon and then click yes to confirm the deletion. And you can also drag the selected frame onto the delete icon. How to unify layer properties in animation frames? Unify layer properties in animation frames. By the way, the unify button, unify layer position, unify layer visibility, and unify layer style. In the layers panel, determine how the changes you make to attributes in the active animation frame apply to the other frames in the same layer. When a unify button, by the way, is selected, that attribute is changed in all the frames in the active layer, and when that button is deselected, changes apply to only the active frame. And the propagate frame 1 option in the layers panel also determines how the changes you make to attributes in the first frame will apply to the other frames in the same layer. And when it is selected, actually, you can change an attribute in the first frame, and all subsequent frames in the active layer will change, by the way, in relation to the first frame and preserve the animation you have already created. And how to unify layer properties? If you would like to unify layer properties, what should you do? We have two steps. Step number 1, in the timeline panel, you should change the attribute to one frame. Step number 2, in the layers panel, click Unify Layer Position, then Unify Layer Visibility, or Unify Layer Style to have the changed attribute applied to all other frames in the active layer. And after that, propagate frame 1. How to propagate frame 1? We have steps. Number 1, in the layers panel, select the propagate frame 1 option. And step number 2, in the timeline panel, you should change the attribute for the first frame, and the changed attribute is applied actually in relation to all subsequent frames in a layer. And also you can propagate frames by selecting any consecutive group of frames in the layer and changing an attribute in any of the selected frames. And how to show or hide Unify Layers buttons. How to show or hide Unify Layers buttons. By the way, you can choose animation options from the Layers panel menu, and then choose one of the following. We have many options here now, 3 options only. First option, automatic. Automatic is meaning displays the Unify Layers buttons when the timeline panel is open. And the second option, always show. Always show is meaning displays the Unify Layers buttons whether the timeline panel is open or closed. The third option is always hide. Always hide is meaning hides the Unify Layers buttons whether the timeline panel is open or closed. How to copy? How to copy frames with layer properties? How to copy frames with layer properties? By the way, to understand what happens when you copy and paste a frame. Think of a frame as a duplicate version of an image with a given layer configuration. And when you copy a frame, you copy the configurations of layers, including each layer's visibility setting and position and other properties. And when you paste a frame, you apply that layer configuration to the destination frame, by the way. And we have steps. Step number 1, you should select one or more frames you want to copy in the timeline panel. Step number 2, to choose copy frame from the panel menu. And step number 3, select a destination frame or frames in the current animation or another animation. Step number 4, choose paste frame from the panel menu. Step number 5, select a paste method. And we have options here now again. The first option, replace frames. Replace frames is meaning replaces the selected frames with the copied frames, and no new layers by the way are added, and the properties of each existing layer in the destination frames are replaced by the way by those of each copied layer. And when you paste frames between images, new layer by the way are added to the image. However, only the pasted layers are visible in the destination frames, and the existing layers are hidden. And what about paste over selection? Paste over selection is meaning adds the contents of the pasted frames as new layers in the image. And when you paste frames into the image, the same image, using this option doubles the number of layers in the image, and in the destination frames, the newly pasted layers are visible by the way, and the original layers are hidden. And in the non-destination frames, the newly pasted layers are hidden. And what about paste before selection or paste after selection? Paste before selection or paste after selection is meaning adds the copied frames before or after the destination frame. And when you paste frames between images, new layers by the way are added to the image. However, only the pasted layers are visible in the new frames, and the existing layers are hidden. Step number 6, optional. To link pasted layers in the layers panel, you should select link edit layers firstly. And this option, by the way, works only when pasted frames into another document, and select it when you plan to reposition the pasted layers are as a unit. And number 7, click OK.